Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Moen After Dark. It's a very special Memorial Day weekend episode. We're very thankful to the people who could join us tonight. I am here with my partner, Rock and Rant. How you doing, Rock?
I'm good. Hope everyone's having a good Memorial Day weekend and honoring the people who also gave us this holiday from their sacrifice. So,
Very true. I did all my running around yesterday to decorate graves, World War II veteran grandparents. So um, I do want to reiterate thank you to all who have served and who have given the ultimate sacrifice for our liberty and freedom, for allowing me to Georgia Tech, um, and Syracuse. What are you drinking there?
this is just basically pure vodka with a little bit of soda in
Oh,
it.
wow. Wow. I am having a little bourbon with some Coke. Coke, full strength Coke.
Yeah.
So
So, if we did a marathon stream today, it would be definitely interesting. Hour three.
um I don't think you understand the joke here, conundrum. That says vote for Palantine. Some people will get the reference. Film fans will get the reference, but yeah, that does not say Palestine. That says Palantine. Charles Palantine. We're going to talk a little bit about college football today. Busy week. I mean, really, the House versus NCAA pass. And then we have the Pac 12 airing its final conference game. Uh, you know, kind of disappointing, I would say. From my perspective, growing up, knowing the Pac 10, the Rose Bowl rivalries, but also coming from a point where I understand why it had to happen. Because I'm a Big Ten guy, and we had to
Right.
make a move after Texas and Oklahoma, but definitely, uh, it's a bit of a sad day. The Conference of
Yeah.
Champions. I know the Oregon State and Washington State are going to try and pull it back together with a reformatted version of that conference, but um, sad day. I know your wife's a UCLA Bruin. What any thoughts from her?
I think the take here is just it was inevitable and unfortunate, but it's probably less stressful when you're landing in the Big Ten as opposed to the schools who either are trying to figure out how to keep the leverage that they had when they were in the Pac-12 and to move to the Big 12, which is at least a softer landing spot for sure, versus what Washington State and Oregon State fans are having to go through. I think if you if you're in the ACC and you're one of those schools, you're living, 4 years later past what UCLA and USC were sort of dealing with, in particular USC. So I think it also just goes to show that when you hire poorly, what can happen. And the Pac-12 unfortunately hired poorly a couple of times, and they got it right the third time potentially, but it was too late. But maybe
Yeah,
that will help the other two down the road.
yeah, it's definitely there's going to be a post mortem here, and I think we're going to end up seeing people doing this post mortem for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And there was a great saying in the Ken Burns Civil War documentary, "Died of a cause." And I think on the Pac-12's tombstone, it's going to say something similar. It died of a cause. They tried to get these out of the box thinkers to come in and run the conference, and they may not have had the savvy that some other people did, coming from the various walks of life, professional tennis, casino management, things like that. So I definitely think the Pac 12 died of a cause.
Yeah, and I think the ACC seems to have, in its own form, not learned any of the lessons because it is probably the closest thing to a spiritual cousin, conference culture wise and alignment wise, and doesn't seem to have learned a thing.
All right, they're having a little trouble hearing you in the chat, Rock and Rant. So if you could speak up, um, that'd be great. Make sure everybody can hear you.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and say hello to some people that have jumped in here already. Buckshot Kid was the first. He says, "Oh hey, at the College Football Mafia." You're right, Buckshot Kid. I wrote the description and then I didn't tag you. Dan Miter, looking at the thumbnail, I'm assuming that the SEC on one side and the Big Ten on the other. Everyone else is in the casket. ESPN, Fox, Sankey, and Petiti are the pallbearers. Well, not everybody. Uh, the Big 12 is still out there. The ACC still exists, although they're more than likely going to lose Florida State and Clemson, plus probably Miami and UNC, I think, at this point.
Yeah, there's some members trying to make sure that somebody else gets shot first, right? So that they don't have to become a pallbearer. They can sit there and mourn, but aren't the ones getting buried.
Right on. Timothy Green, good day, everyone. Hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you, Timothy Green. Much appreciated. Nathan Campbell's in the house. Hi, guys. Good to see you, Nathan Campbell. Dark Moon from West Virginia. Appreciate the West Virginia people coming in here. Near and dear to my heart. Jan Hulk, hey all. Good to see you, Jan from Slovenia. West Virginia Earl, another West Virginia Mountaineer. I like that picture with the Black Bears in there, Earl. David Hackett, good to see you, David. Minnesota Seminole saying hello. Bob Swanger saying hello, guys. Illini Ted's saying hello to us. Good to see you, Illini Ted. Dark Moon says no crown. No, just straight mohawk tonight, guys. Your big head's in the way. I'm sorry, I do have a big head. But if anybody got as a Taxi Driver reference, I watched Taxi Driver last night. Fantastic movie. It inspired me. But it only inspired me to cut my hair. It didn't inspire me to do anything else. Dan Miter says he just watched the Indy 500 for the first time in 5 years. What a race. Joseph Newgard back-to-back wins. I went to the Indy 500 once when I was 19. Just for the experience.
Yeah, I tuned into the beginning of it and was not paying enough attention to realize it was tape delayed, and I was watching the replay of 2023. So it was like I got two races for one since I haven't watched it in a while.
Yeah. I went to the infield. We watched it from the infield. It was kind of cool, but I'm not a big racing guy, but I can understand if you appreciate racing how much you love that. DP says I didn't even know the race was on today. The race was huge when I was a kid, and now I don't hear anything about it. Yeah, it's usually Memorial Day weekend. It's always Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, that's probably just a byproduct of going from 3 or 6 channels, depending upon wherever you lived, to a world of too many options, so that you don't even hear about it getting promoted when you're watching a Wednesday night TV show.
Coy's in the house. Good to see you, Coy. Fatal Jedi 2672. Good to see you, Fatal Jedi. That's a badass name. Laura Weiss, hey y'all. Hope everyone is okay with all of the severe weather. It passed north of me today. County north of me had a tornado touchdown, but we're okay here. But we are expecting some more rain early this morning, which is when I hate it the worst. Severe weather at like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning is just, terrible. But yes, I hope everybody, if you are in the path of this system, I hope you stayed safe. And if you're still in the path of the system, I hope you keep safe. All right, let's get to some questions here. DP, Pac and ACC watched with butts glued to seats as the entire market changed and passed them by. Now it's too late. ACC was the most wealthy and best conference as early as 20 years ago.
It was a great conference, and it still is a great conference in a lot of regards, just not adapting well to the needs of its membership and not really foreseeing. They saw the role that football was going to play, and that's why they brought Florida State in and then later on expanded, but they definitely did not pay attention enough. And there's some clearly shady dealings going on with Swafford and his son that have come up to sort of demonstrate why they're in the position that they are in right now.
Yeah, the ACC was, I think, a little too, they wanted stability more than they wanted money, and they got neither. So, Coy says, congrats to Nebraska for winning the Big Ten baseball championship. And I don't know who the Trojans played, I believe, Arizona. I think that was the last Pac-10, Pac-12 baseball championship. I'm not sure who the Trojans played, but I know whoever they played, the Trojans lost.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's an interesting time for people who also love college baseball, right? Because to me, the second biggest thing besides the revenue share is just the impact on rosters and scholarships, of which baseball only having 11.7 for a 30 plus man roster, and what happens down the road for the schools that really care about it is one of the secondary stories of the settlement to me.
well, a school like Nebraska is a perfect example. You know, they care about football, they care about baseball. So it's going to be interesting to see how it gets divided among the two. Uh, Taxi Driver. Who knew Jodie Foster would turn out to catch Hannibal Lecter? And who knew she would ruin True Detective? Um,
You can live a lifetime off of that role in Silence of the Lambs, though, so we can give her a pass on
yeah,
that one.
I'll give her a pass on that. But boy, True Detective was a great show. Um, and this last season was just awful. Arizona one. Thank you, Coy, for reminding me. I knew it was one of the Arizona schools, but I didn't want to commit to one and piss off everybody else. uh, Arizona beat USC to win the final Pac baseball game. The ACC banked on basketball carrying the programs and lost. I want to go back. I don't know if you happen to see it on Twitter, but if anybody wants to, go ahead and look up the last moments of that Pac 12 network broadcast. I think that gentleman did a fantastic job summarizing the Pac 12 uh, and what the conference meant to him from a standpoint. He grew up in the Bay Area, went to Cal, you know, all those great memories. The one thing I will say about the Pac 12 uh, sort of dying is that at least for the four schools that are going into the Big Ten, their traditions and legacy will be somewhat preserved on the Big Ten network. I really wish there was something like that for the Big 12, where we could see Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State kind of have their legacy games still broadcast, their great seasons, their great Heisman winners. I don't know if do you have the Big 12 net or Big 10 network out there in LA yet?
Yeah, we had it well before the announcement. I can't speak to every system, but I don't think since inception that I haven't had it from when I moved back to LA, which was 14 or 15 years ago. I've had a couple of stints out here, but yeah, we've had Big Ten forever, had SEC forever. That's why it was always interesting as I got more into this to learn about which states did or didn't have the carriage fees for the other networks, because those were two conferences that had no presence in the state that were easy to find. Now, whether that's because of Los Angeles and the media market that it is, or just because the name power of those two conferences and their alumni network, we never had that. We never had that problem. I'd also say the Pac-2 commissioner, or Pac-12 commissioner, as she is currently, also did a pretty excellent series of posts on Twitter X, thanking all the players and athletes who had come before. If you want to seek that out as well, and so we did go through the eulogies of the conference.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was definitely bittersweet because you hate to see the pack go, but as a Big Ten guy, I understand that it was for the survival of my conference that, you know, somebody had to get eaten and it had to be the pack. And it's going to end up being the ACC as well. That's just the way the landscape is, and it's unfortunate, but what it is. Fatal Jedi, the ACC banked on basketball carrying the programs and lost. I think the ACC banked on stability, and when they banked on
Yeah.
stability, they actually ended up shooting themselves in the foot by getting neither stability nor the money that they richly deserved. So
Yeah, I would say they probably more did an improper allocation on who to bank. I think they did bank on football, which is why they made the moves that they did, but they didn't do a good job in foreseeing the future. And you see that now, not just in the instability, but just the nature of their deal and 15-year contracts and grant of rights in theory until broken in the court cases that are going on. So it actually, the shotgun marriage is not staying together under the threat of penalty. So
right, and I want to just take care of some business here real quick. If anybody's interested in becoming a member of the channel or leaving a super chat, you can just click the cash icon down there at the bottom. You can do both. You can also gift memberships. Ute did a video today. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you see it. There's been a lot of squabbling on Twitter/X this weekend about Utah to the ACC. And he went ahead and did a video that, and we made this Wild Ute University public because he wanted it public, about Utah is staying put in the Big 12. And I tend to agree with him for all the reasons he listed, plus more.
Yeah, and I think it'd be great if everyone who cares to. It's a great way to drop a mic on people who are going to be commenting about the one article that got 57 videos across creators who are all jumping on the clickbaitish nature of that. And there's no better response. It both helps the channel and the team that you guys have helped support than to drop a link to that video because it's excellent.
Yeah, definitely. It's right on the front homepage. Most recently uploaded video for Wild Ute University. Definitely check it out. You also made a clip from last week's Consigliere show with Bill Farley, correct?
Yeah, we tried to take a couple of segments and make it more digestible. The first one that we dropped is really specifically about North Carolina and how Bill took a look at the economic development and tourism in North Carolina and how that revenue for the state as a whole, let alone for the other institutions in the ACC, could greatly impact in his view, and it does match up to some of the arguing we've seen at the Board of Governors and Board of Trustees, but how that could impact the decision for UNC to make a conference move. So if you didn't get to see last week's full episode of the Consigliere that Nate was able to put together, and with our guest Bill, take a look at that one, and you can get at least the first section on the UNC situation. We'll probably drop another clip later that highlights the part of the conversation around private equity in general and specifically for Florida State.
Right. Nathan says Dallas Mavs 2-0, Dallas Stars 1-1. I guess Dallas is doing pretty well for itself then. Oklahoma State won baseball bedlam after winning the pool. Great way to send off Oklahoma University. Coy says the video was very good with the guy talking about the pack for the final broadcast. It was a touching tribute. I liked it. I'm not going to say that.
Is this going to be my thing where I have to substitute for
you have to say that. I can't.
Baby.
Yeah, great job OSU and the U. So at least he didn't call me. At least he didn't call Ohio State Ohio. But he almost got me. Big 12 will be seen with Green Acres. Green Acres airs on Sunday nights at 9. Come on, can't show it.
Fierce, man. Every time, fierce.
Dallas Marquez, let's go. Back pre-2000, Dan Miter, remember, back pre-2000, the ACC paid out the most conference revenue. Funny how football took over and caught them flat-footed.
I just don't understand how they couldn't have had a better handle on everything, but I guess people have their blind spots.
Well, you also have to take into account that Miami and Virginia Tech have been down for the last 2 or so decades. And
unequivocally, but that still doesn't completely absolve the situation, right? Because let's just say that by the time this deal was originally signed, right, that history of decades hadn't actually been in place yet, right? This is 2013, 2014 era when the ACC network conversations were going on. So regardless of all of that, which is certainly contributing factors into possible future renegotiations, you still have the die was cast, in my opinion.
The Rubicon has been crossed. The ACC contract was way too long. Maybe, we don't know yet. We've got to see him because according to Florida State and Clemson, there is a look-in clause, and effectively this contract should end on the 2027. Now the ACC is claiming that doesn't exist to that extent, and this extends all the way to 2036 regardless. So,
but even the ACC commissioner, in more glass half full wording said that there's a look in, right? It's definitely, from everything we've heard, more of a glass half empty to completely empty kind of take, but we shall see. And if the ACC is wrong, then we know that there's another element to this of them not getting the votes to approve the extension to begin with and the option year, and giving ESPN more time to decide to take up the option.
Illini Ted says, I'm still wondering what the settlement would do to the schools in the G5, FCS, and non-football leagues. We were actually discussing this before the show. I still can't figure out this settlement. I've read article after article. I've seen it multiple ways. I'm waiting to talk to somebody from an actual athletic department, hopefully sometime this week, and hopefully they can straighten me out and explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, or at least break down the quintessential parts of it so I can kind of explain it better. But I'm lost. Do you have anything on this, Rock and Rant?
No, I think ultimately we are all in this. Whether it's a hard cap, that means that if anybody spends to it, that certain schools are going to basically spend less as a proportion of their actual revenue, versus others who choose to say it, or if it's a percentage of your revenue up to a percentage cap. I tend to believe it's the former. That's how I've read it, but others as smart or smarter have had different takes on it. But the other part too is just the Title IX, and how is that pie going to be split originally? Let's say it's a hard cap of 20 or 22 million dollars. How is that being applied in the schools, and how the number of athletes you have? If it is a hard cap, not a percentage of your overall revenue, that you have to divide that number amongst, NIL aside, is also going to be very different from school to school if that's what actually happens. So I think we've just begun to understand it.
Tony Lawson wants to let Will Duke know he did a very good video. He did, and he's under the weather, so hopefully he's out there feeling a little better now. But he definitely wanted to, after he saw that post, he definitely wanted to get on there and set the record straight. So very good for him to do that, and we appreciate that. Hope he feels better. RT, a member, says, I like Utah. It seems their fans are University of Texas 2.0, though. Not all, but there definitely are some vocal ones. Looking forward to some humility getting imposed. They are the villain this year.
I would encourage Utah to just embrace being the villain. It's kind of fun.
I would too. Honestly, I would. Bob Swanger, Moen, when is your next timeline shoe going to be? It's going to be at some point within the next 7 days. I've still got to tweak some graphics on it. I got caught up doing some other stuff outside of this week, work stuff. But yeah, Pac 16. There, we're talking this show about the demise of the Pac. Imagine what would happen if the Pac had actually added Texas, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech. Would have been a whole new ball game for them. Trust me, I mean a whole new ball game
for everyone.
So definitely tune into that. That'll be dropping in the member section within the next 7 days or so. I'll try and work on it a little tomorrow since I have the day off. Mick Stevens letting us know the Devil Frogs won the national championship in tennis. I think Ohio State won the doubles, though. Men's doubles. I think we won the national title in that.
I know a Miami female tennis player won a singles championship. So it looks like there's a lot of tennis to go around in terms of how that all broke out of the different ways that they granted out the championships.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of tennis. I never understood it. I had an ex who played tennis who tried to explain it to me once, and I still didn't understand it. But Conundrum says Tar Heels are too scared to leave. They'll end up sinking with the ACC. What do you think?
I don't know that the Tar Heels are too scared to leave. I think their state might be too smart to have them leave, even if it's detrimental to them, if Bill's take is correct, or even if that's not on the table, the politics are the wild card there, right? I think we talked about it all the time with the North Carolina State backpack. Even if you take away the economic impact for the state, does that happen or not? That's, to me, one of the biggest questions is what happens with UNC and NC State, regardless of what UNC itself wants to do. But I don't think it's UNC fear. I think it's UNC mess in the house that they're living in the state.
Yeah, I think if this settlement goes through, and it's 300 million or north of 300 million. I think that might be the one situation where the backpack can be separated. I think North Carolina State can't afford that number. I think the donors at UNC will somehow find a way to make that number work. Nunn says football's always been the big money maker. It's true. Mick Stevens, TCU is also national champions in rifle. 2 national championships so far this year. Congratulations to the TCU Devil Frogs. They are
Winner.
a winner. Friends call me Sean, a member. ACC settles for stability instead of betting on itself. It's like playing not to lose instead of playing to win. You're absolutely correct. That is an excellent way of putting that. They're playing not to lose.
Prevent defense conference alignments, realignment style.
There you go. Ohio State gave up 18 points to Georgia playing prevent defense. I hate it. I hate it. Play to win. Always play for the win. Unless you're Mario Cristobal.
Except for when it's time to take a knee.
Yes, I was going to say, except when it's time to take a knee. At that point, take the knee. You knew exactly what I was going for there.
You know, the Miami border is harsh or harsher than you are bringing it up. So, you know, when you create yourself, when you make yourself a meme, you have to live with it. And even if you eventually redeem yourself, you still will live with it. Memes are forever for the most part.
Daniel Dilly or Dill, I apologize if I said that wrong. If the pack had gotten Texas and the gang, the demise would have still happened due to having the same leadership. Well, I don't know about that. Do you think Texas and Oklahoma would have allowed the same leadership to stay put in the pack? Do you think they'd have been a more dominant voice than, say, a Stanford and Cal, and had a little more pull to get somebody who was more of a football operational person in there, or even athletically minded?
I personally, I mean, we don't know, but the multiverse where that happened, I don't think that the demise happens. I think you then have such substantial brands in play there, and yes, Texas would figure out very quickly how to have an outsized voice. That's just the way it is, and I know they're going to go into the SEC, and that probably will not be the same because there's more equals relatively, but it's still they'll still have a very big voice from day one. It's just by definition, you have the money, you have the history, you have the market. I don't think the Pac-12, if they got in Texas and Oklahoma and the others, would be in the situation they are, even if we were going down this path in a different form.
Nathan wants to know what 4 teams you see from the ACC going to the Big 12.
I think personally today it's NC State, Louisville. I actually think that Syracuse could happen for other reasons that some days I might not think. I would say NC State and Syracuse are the 2 that I least believe. And I just feel like Virginia Tech is a better fit than any of the Virginias or Georgia Techs at this point, even though I think others are great fits ultimately. But that school, having been there and been to some of the other states and schools that are in that conference, distance aside, I think that they would culturally fit really well.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence now that the settlement stuff has come up. I'm on the fence. If the Wolfpack backpack breaks, I think North Carolina State is assured a spot in the Big 12. I think Virginia Tech is as well, and I think Pitt is, which leaves number 4 up in the air, which is going to be Louisville probably. So I think Louisville, Pitt, Virginia Tech, North Carolina State.
Yeah, I could see it going. There's so many. That's the one. There's so many justifiable things you can do. You can go down the pure money zone and look at the analysis that Utes doing. Virginia Tech doesn't fit that from some of the modeling he's done to the degree that you would empirically think, but they just feel like they would be a great school for there. And I can see West Virginia wanting their rivals in and making it so they feel they have more people in their relative time zones between Pitt and Virginia Tech and Louisville. I could see all of those scenarios playing out, and also the scenario that it's not 4, it's 6. Who knows?
Illini Ted says, "What is the deal with Shiloh Sanders? Excuse me, declaring bankruptcy, even with all his NIL? Is it for his legal troubles? It's 100% for his legal troubles. He's trying to
It's
get Dodge having to pay for a settlement."
yeah, he's trying to do that. I don't know whether he has any actual risk of charges, but neon orange jumpsuits is also a thing. Whether that applies in this case, I don't know. But if you look at the details of all of that background, assuming it's true, which I don't know that to be the case, it's pretty nasty.
Yeah, and a Miami guy would know about orange jumpsuits. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes, Ohio State, the Saints that they are, there's literally nothing out there about anyone from Ohio State ever.
Maurice Claret did nothing wrong.
Yeah, nothing.
Tom Dubay, what are examples of moves the ACC could have made to play to win? One is not committing to a media contract that extends to 2036 without knowing the market variables.
Yes. 20-year contracts, roughly, which is essentially what is alluded to having been signed in some form. It wasn't the initial contract, but when the ACC network conversations were coming down, that's when it got extended. That's a really long time in media rights, and it's not just crapping all over the ACC. You can look at it in the sense of the Big Ten's conference deal will have come up from the time the ACC network launched or got agreed to the time the theoretical full 2036 is at what, 3 times within that time frame. SEC is 2 or 3 times. NBA is a few times. So it's not just beating on somebody just to keep on piling on. It's you just look at the other leagues and conferences, and it's extensive. And yes, the ACC network I know is spinning off money for them. Maybe not to the degree the other two are, but it's that stability is coming at a big price.
Yeah, it's coming at a huge price. That was when they do the post mortem on the ACC, that's going to be the main cause of death right there. Was signing a 20-year media deal. Uh, that was just ludicrous. I understand why they did it. They wanted stability, but when you do something for a reason like that, you are playing to lose. So if Dan Miter, a member, says, so if linear TV numbers are dropping, why isn't revenue going to be more competitive in future where streaming is going to happen? Great question. I don't know that I
Because
have the answer.
I mean, my take would be, and not not knowing the answer either, is that ultimately, if you were to sit there and think of, well, the linear TV and carriage fees go down over time, continue to go down to a degree, it's then goes more to the eyeballs on the properties, right? And those properties that get the most attention nationally, if you don't have to worry about cable systems as much, it's not going to go away tomorrow. It's been declining. That's why that gap is going to happen, and that's why the Big Ten and the SEC are continuing to try to gather the most premium brands that they can, because it's about the overall eyeballs as well.
Almighty Finn lets us know the Indy 500 is in my city. It's not as packed as it used to be. Ever since COVID, the crowds are not as large anymore. Used to live in Indianapolis. It's a very nice town in certain parts. But everybody drives like an idiot there. I'm sorry. Everybody
They're all
drives like it's a 500.
they're all trying to get away from the people who work at the NCAA HQ.
And I'll tell you what, people in Columbus drive like idiots too. Conundrum says ACC could have hired a man instead of a boy to be their commissioner. They did hire a man, and then he made a special deal where his boys, the company Raycom, got a hell of a deal from the ACC.
And then they hired a gentleman instead of a professional.
Yes, they hired. You feel bad
North
for him under certain terms, but then he does off gaffes. Like, I don't know why SMU is joining on one day and California and Stanford are joining on another.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but he was a Northwestern AD, so you think he would have learned something from osmosis of being in the Big Ten and you know,
I don't think he
not
was the
every.
AD. I think he was the president at Northwestern. Yep, you're muted.
Yes, even more so. But either way, right? He believed in an alliance and handshakes, and you can't be so naive.
Ty Kev, another member of our Discord. By the way, guys, if you want to join the Discord, it's in the link is in the description of the video. But I'll go ahead and have Nightbot pop this up if he's not too drunk. And you can join that way too. We talk about college football and they're 24/7. Great group of people. It's getting bigger every day. I highly suggest that you go in there and jump in there sometime. Get your feet wet before college football season starts, because when football season starts, it's going to be fast and frenzied in there.
Yeah, we're definitely getting to the place of having enough members where the you sort of spiral into a lot more conversation. So if you haven't joined yet, invite a friend, join us, and a lot more stuff to come as we get further into the summer.
Ty Kev's Dan Miter, great observation. Someone posted a ton of data about commercial rates on the CFB Mafia Discord that backs up your argument. Pretty much points to it being about affiliates and whatnot. So there you go.
And certain markets will matter more to Fox, right? In that regard too. Especially if they actually own a station in a market, like they'll have a little bit of a different look at things than ESPN specifically might, unless ABC, I guess, owns a station as well in that market. But that's just another layer to everything.
What team changing conferences do you think might have trouble adapting to their new conference and not perform to lofty fan expectations, at least for a couple years? For me, I would say it's probably going to be Washington, coming off a national championship appearance. I think they're going to have trouble adapting into the Big Ten with all the travel on the schedule and just the bigger lines, which is, I mean, that's where Michigan beat them in the national championship game, was on the line of scrimmage. So, Michigan, while they were the best lines offensively and defensively this year, you're going to run into that competition pretty often in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Washington is probably the school that, just even circumstantially, because they're just coming off the best season, right? And they've had the most changes within their organization with coaching changes. And I'm a big Jed Fish fan generally. I don't know about how he does or doesn't talk to his players when he's leaving and changing schools and all that thing that, I'm sure Arizona fans have an opinion on. But I just think it's a natural fit. And conversely, all the jokes aside, I think SMU might have the best path towards success because their schedule is pretty weak. I think Rhett Lashley is a fairly good coach, and everybody expects, they're the brunt of the joke, so they're paying to get their way. So in some regard, everybody else's expectations about them might be lower, and they were hovering around the top 25 last year. So and a lot of the preseason top 25, they're in the bottom half of it. So they might be the one that surprises relative to the conference that they're moving in expectations.
Yeah, I would say my runner up would be Oklahoma. I think losing Dylan Gabriel, I just have to see how they're going to handle losing him moving forward. But I think they might be the other one that just kind of disappoints. And for disappointing for Oklahoma, it'd be like 8 wins. So, Ty Kev, ACC did get 2 of the most prestigious university brands, maybe even 3 to become members this year.
I mean, if we were doing a Billy Madison debate thing, we'd be in great shape in terms of that. But sports wise, they haven't exactly been killing it in the primary sports. I mean, Stanford has one of the best athletic programs in the country for all the Olympic sports. I'm
Right.
not doing anything negative on that. I just think primarily the football side, their brands are great. Their football brands have been down for a moment in time. So we'll see whether that's what everyone's eyes are going to be looking on, right? No one's really caring about the rest of it as all of this stuff is playing out, and as North Carolina and Florida State and Clemson, like that's a reason they voted against them, is they don't bring the value for the brand of football, that therefore didn't bring extra value from the revenue side.
Let's see. You right, Moen. I live on the east side of Indianapolis. It's wild, but it's safer than still living in Gary. And you're right, people in the city can't drive. You're right. I used to live on the southeast side. People can't drive, but I'd rather live there than live in Gary. So, Jim Phillips was the president, not the athletic director. Thank you. I knew he was something. Right, but he renewed Pat Fitzgerald's contract, so he's an idiot. At the time, he didn't know that stuff about the hazing. Fitzgerald was for Northwestern a good coach. Going to Shiloh Sanders again. Yeah, he owes that security guard $12 to $14 million he assaulted in high school, which I don't understand. If he was a high schooler when he did that, unless he was 18, that should be coming out of his daddy's pocket.
Yeah, you know what? There's never a lack of drama around that program since the day Dion got there, which has its positives and negatives for them.
And then Conundrum follows that up with Colorado will have a hard time. Everybody hates him.
Hate's a good thing sometimes in college sports and all sports rivalries. So, but there's not like it's the time of massive NCAA enforcement and oversight right now. That's when that kind of stuff used to have a potential backlash where people snitched on you in the background. Like, who's going to snitch on anyone right now?
Ryan Willie, who's been a member for 5 months. Thank you for being a member, Ryan. ESPN is predicting Olympic sport athletes will sue for their share. Did ESPN predict the end of college sports? With streaming, market size doesn't matter as much. Well, I mean, if we're going to go that route, I don't know that they predicted it as much as they caused it.
Some degree of self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Market size doesn't matter as much, but with the new streaming that's moving forward with that new ESPN package, should be interesting. Thank you for being a member, Ryan. You made a great point. The Olympic athletes are going to sue, but I mean, at some point, you're going to have to cut this off, or people are going to be making $15 out of this settlement. Because I mean, like at Ohio State, I think there's thousands of student athletes.
Right. Like, that's the whole thing with that revenue share portion of everything with the cap. If it is a hard cap, and depending upon what the Title IX ramifications are, and then whether they're allocating it based off of whether a student is a particular sport is a revenue generator or not, or are they just going to evenly distribute it? In theory, if it's a hard cap, a school like Ohio State, on a per athlete basis, might be paying the least amount because they just have such a wide ranging program versus somebody else who can afford to spend a cap of 22 million and has half the athletes that even everyone gets the same amount. That will be for non-revenue sports significantly different when they might not have NIL in play for the rifle team, to use a current example earlier in the chat.
Illini Ted says ACC stands for academics. I guess.
I don't know. I think you can make a good argument that the Pac-12 and clearly the Big Ten, especially with the academic alliance, all accounted for that in their sort of cultural DNA of those schools, while also trying to excel at sports.
Marlene, that's not the worst thing I've ever been called. When did the settlement stuff come out? Came out last week, Thursday.
Wednesday night leaking into Thursday, more analysis on Friday, kind of zone, tons of articles out there.
Yeah, follow Ross Dellinger on Twitter. Ross Dellinger's the man you want to be following. Everybody needs to be following him. I mean, his stuff has been on point and it's been early. Clint Moses, from the video I watched, it looked like the security guard threw Shiloh into a glass door first. I couldn't tell you. I just know what the courts are saying.
Yes, I have not seen the video. I just know the reported details of it, and whether they're the full story or a partial picture or a biased take. Either way, the more famous person is usually in a tougher spot, no matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah, you're right. It's a different standard for celebrities. Tony Lawson reminds us Mel Tucker got a win in court the other day. He did. And I think Mel Tucker should get paid every cent he's owed by Michigan State.
I did not see that.
Yeah, It's clearly that they found a reason to fire him. They wanted to fire him because of how bad the football program was. Nothing says Atlantic Coast Conference like Stanford, SMU, and Cal.
Hey, I'm happy at least until hopefully Miami gets out. Every once in a while, it gets for me an easier road trip. So I will go to see Miami play at Cal this summer because it's the shortest road trip I can take.
Yeah, nothing says the Big Ten like Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA. So I'm really not in. I'm in a glass house and I'm not prepared to throw any stones. Ryan, a swimmer is the person who filed the House versus NCAA suit. Are you talking about another suit? Yeah, there is another suit out there.
Yeah, there's Fontenot in Colorado that did not get rolled up. I mean, technically, the settlement is on 3 cases that did get rolled up, but there's the case in Colorado that did not for whatever reason, which is separate from the ongoing student athletes as employees conversations around like the NLRB case.
Yes, yeah, those NLRB cases are still all out there. So after watching the show Friday, Thursday, with the North Carolina tourism revenue outweighing conference affiliation, makes me think FSU and Clemson might be the only departures.
Don't think so personally, both because I wish it to not be the case, but also because I believe it's not the case. If NC doesn't go, it does not mean that a conference like the Big Ten and SEC don't necessarily expand by 2 each or some sort of offshoot of that. There are a lot of scenarios. I think if those schools get away, I would be utterly stunned that Miami doesn't lead to.
Pat Fitzgerald is pushing for a December trial date. What do you think will the settlement be? I think he's going to get paid $20 million.
I would just be making up a number because I haven't been paying attention to it other since the moment he got. So I'll just say 15 million just to come up with some random guess. But I could have just taken a dart and thrown it against the wall.
It's hard on speculation where you've got, I don't think there's any direct ties to Pat Fitzgerald involved with the hazing. So that's what I think is going to be kind of the nail in the coffin for Northwestern. But Northwestern's got money; they can afford it. Pay him. Tom Dubay, the House settlement is legal quicksand. The first case settlement will lead to another suit and another and another. The payment terms were so arbitrary, which is why we saw the leader of Notre Dame come out the other day and basically plead to Congress to step in and give an antitrust exemption to the NCAA, which would prevent these further suits.
Yeah, I personally thought that was a PR sign of desperation for me. Like I know others will have a very valid argument that that statement was just them doing more public lobbying. I'm of the mindset from my background in history and can absolutely be wrong that if they had it so locked up with the lobbyists that the Notre Dame president would not need to come out as strong like that out front and become a lightning rod for anybody who's has a different thought by making that statement. We shall see. I don't doubt that ultimately that some of the things he advocates for there will happen. I'm just in the school that it will happen after the ramifications of the settlement are enacted. There are plenty of really smart people that think they have a lot more together and that the Congress will act and back the schools with the advocacy of the lawyers for the plaintiffs saying that they will help advocate for that in Congress. So definitely there are different takes out there for sure.
Illini Ted, do you think FSU is positioning themselves to leave the ACC whether or not anyone else does? Clemson getting a portion of the FSU buyout could use it for their own buyout. Possible wild times ahead.
I mean, can you imagine, Moen, any scenario where FSU is in the ACC? Let's even be generous by 2030, let alone, I don't even see a scenario where they're in the ACC by 2026 or 2027, even if a lot of things went wrong. It just seems to me that they're hell bent on figuring it out and they have the ammunition to make it happen, whether through court cases, getting out in a month, private equity, that they're figuring out every single ways path to their destination they can get.
Yeah, I think I'd be shocked from what I've heard from Greg if they're even in the ACC by next season. I think that they could settle this all, wrap it up by August, and you'll know where they're going. As for Clemson staying around and sticking around and getting some of that buyout, the ACC is going to show. There's going to be a delay on when that buyout's going to be paid. You're probably going to get at least a year or two delay on it, and then it's going to be in staggered payments. They're not going to bulk sum that settlement up to members.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I mean, and clearly a school could be wrong, but I don't believe any school takes the steps that either of those did with their lawsuit without a high degree of confidence that they have an exit path, even if things don't go the way they want them to in there. You're just poisoning the house that you live in to think about living there much longer.
Yeah, I mean they know they're getting out and they have a landing spot. They probably have two landing spots for both of them. Illini Ted says you'd have to say that comparison as nothing says Big Ten like having 18 members. Well, there you go. But we've had 11 since 1994, so having 11 for 20 years, 30 years.
It is fairly ridiculous for universities to have conferences named after accounts that are wrong, though obviously the brand itself was extremely strong.
Right.
But it is kind of like, it's so emblematic of all of this.
Yes, it's like the Atlantic Coast Conference has Stanford and Cal, who are in the Pacific Coast. And,
they have an easier one, right? Which is you just change Atlantic to all. But
even the SEC, I don't know that I would consider Oklahoma Southeastern, but maybe the Pac-2 is the only one that can lay claim to actually having a decent name.
For now.
None. A member, Rock and Rant, where would you want to see the U end up in, and with whom would you want to go there with?
For me personally, and it's selfish, I want to go to the Big Ten. If Miami were to get an exit path, I would clearly not cry about the SEC. The only two things as a pure fan, not from somebody fascinated with the entire conversation, is I want to get out of the ACC to one of those two conferences selfishly for the Big Ten because of the West Coast presence where I currently live. And all the other thing I care about is making sure that wherever Miami and FSU ultimately land, that rivalry continues on every year.
Terry Snyder is a Washington State Cougar. Well, there you go. You're the Pac-2. You've actually got a name that makes sense. Fitz's son Ryan committed as a Hawkeye walk-on QB. That's good. They desperately need QBs.
I mean, they can only go up on their offense this year, right? I mean, is there any way to go lower? So it seems like they've made a lot of good moves. They walk-on quarterbacks aside, which who knows? Well, I guess for this season, there will still be walk-on quarterbacks, whether the roster limits and scholarship things get settled for 2025 and the quote-unquote walk-on thing doesn't exist anymore. I guess we'll find out in time. But Iowa's got to go up in offense. They seem like I think they've hit the floor that you can do while still being a good program like they really are.
Interesting that you saw. Did you see the tier list for EA college football?
I did. Yeah.
Iowa is tier 1.
Yeah, there was some interesting choice. For the most part, they made sense. There were a couple that didn't make sense to me, relative to some that were in tier 2. Like I personally would have Florida State higher than the Clemson, just to use that very specific example. But they weren't. There's just a large group in tier 2, and there's a pretty big gap within tier 2 to me. I didn't really pay much attention to this as it went downhill, but that one line between 1 and 2 was definitely interesting. Anyone in particular catch your eye that was in tier 1 that you didn't expect, or tier 2 that you thought should have been tier 1?
Tier 1, definitely Iowa caught my eye. But it's Iowa played in the Big Ten West, and the Big Ten West was probably the weakest division among the conferences. Unfortunately, Nebraska's been down, Wisconsin's been down, Minnesota's been up and down. So I understand how Iowa was able to dominate that division of the conference so easily. So, but there was somebody in tier 2, but I can't remember them off the top of my head who I was like, really, tier 2 for for that squad, but then you think back to all this is the recent AP numbers, and you go, okay, well, maybe. Moen or RockAndRant, where do you think? Where do you honestly think FSU ends up without a Big Ten bias?
I mean, a year ago, thought it would be SEC. For the last 6 or 7 months, thought it would be Big Ten. I think that I still believe it's Big Ten. I think that's where the fan base wants, but you know, they want to get out of the ACC more than they probably want to get out of get to the Big Ten. And if the card just fell a certain way, despite how much they hate ESPN right now, and I understand why they do. I don't think SEC is out of the question, but I would, if you gave me money to put on, I'd put it on the Big Ten. They're more
I
valuable to the Big Ten.
right. I think if they're cutting a $300 million check, it's the Big Ten. The Big Ten can offer more. It gets them entree into becoming an AAU institution. You become a full partner in the network right away. That boosts your revenue. It helps you make up some of that shortfall. And obviously, the Big Ten has been very generous with new members and loans and forgiving loans and giving travel costs to them. So, Tony Lawson, Monavision. Thank you for calling me Monavision, as Greg Pflugar used to. Are you predicting FSU in the big by 2025? I'm predicting FSU out of the ACC by 2025.
After last week and the information that Greg and Peek Around the Corner also shared, that seems to be, if I was a betting man, and I am, I would go that route too.
Yeah, Greg will take an L when he does an L, but they're seldom. Ryan Willie, a member, please remember those who gave their lives protecting our country. Great point, Ryan. Happy Memorial Day weekend to everybody. Please remember the soldiers and first responders out there who put their lives on the line every day for us. Continue to do what we do. Thank you to all those. If there's any veterans in the chat, we appreciate your service. Illini Ted says, if you were hired as the Pac-2 commissioner, would you rebuild? And if so, what amount of schools would you want, and who would be the schools you would reach out to?
Well, it's as crazy as this is. I mean, to me, I would still, if I was those two schools, I might be less focused on rebuilding and still trying to do everything you could to join one of the two other conferences that are more established. Because even the Big 12 for sure would make sense if they could somehow turn around whatever prevented them from going to that conference when this all went down. And circumstances do change, right? Like a year from now, 6 months from now, a lot of things could change. More settlement is now done. Other settlements or lawsuits could come up that could change it. And depending upon what does or doesn't happen with the ACC, there's a argument that still could be a diminished ACC could still be more valuable from a rights perspective and a hassle factor of cross country than trying to reformulate the Pac-2 with other schools from the Mountain West or whatever it might be. I think if you're focusing on just building that conference up from scratch, you're just going to try to peel away like 6 to 8 schools from the Mountain West and maybe a couple of others that might be looking for a home from some of the other conferences if you're willing to handle the travel issues to get some more reach in markets and time zones for time slots for your contract.
As for me, I would wait and see what happens with the ACC. If it looks like it's a long shot with the ACC, then you rebuild. You add schools like San Diego State, Fresno State, UNLV, Colorado State, Boise State, Air Force maybe. Definitely, I would keep everything regional. I would not go and try and add a Tulane or a Memphis or anything like that. Keep it regional. Become a regional G5, G6 conference. Go no more than 10 schools, too. I would keep it at 10 schools. Rebuild the Pac-10, not the Pac-12. I think Congress has worldwide issues to deal with. Yeah, well, legislation for Notre Dame crying wolf, tired of everyone bending over for them. It's not just Notre Dame crying wolf here. This is pretty much every institution in the NCAA is crying wolf.
Yeah, the Notre Dame president being out there is just being the lightning rod for a lot of other voices with a school that can probably manage the thing that they're asking to get done if it didn't happen the easiest, right? They're one of the schools that could deal with it in one way or another. But I agree, but others don't.
Nathan Campbell says, sorry, Moen. No, that's all right. You can call me Marlene, Nathan. Like I said, I've been called a lot worse. Has been. It's a great name. Any guess on how the 22% salary cap for each school will be calculated? By P4 average, by conference average, or by individual athletic budgets? I'm not sure. I'm going to talk with somebody in an athletic department this coming week, hopefully, and I will get an answer for you. As a matter of fact, if you guys want to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Moen After Dark. Go ahead and hit me up with a question. I will ask them and see if they know the answer to it, because the articles I'm reading it's reading two different ways from different article points of view. So I don't want to give you an answer that 100% I don't know the answer to. So my answer is I don't know the answer. Tony Lawson, the tiers were determined by the final AP polls over the last 10 years. I believe Iowa is usually ranked at the end of the season. Yes, they are.
And if that's the case, it makes sense. But at the flip side, then they're doing all the data on the players now, right? And who they're putting in, what scores they're doing. I'm not sure in a game going into the 2024 season why AP rank of 10 years ago should be factored in at all to the tiers. But I can see like the last 3 years because it's trend and you're always going to have somebody that rises up from out of nowhere. But 10 years seems pretty long.
Conundrum thought Knowles to the Big Ten for months, but now I think the SEC could be. The Big Ten still has a shot with getting Miami if they really want to get into Florida. Any idea what a school moving from one tier to another, i.e., G5 to P3, P4, or P3, 4 to P2, would pay for house settlement for back payments?
I was under the impression that the schools, from a back payments perspective, not a future rev share, are paying based off of the conference that was, where they were when the conferences were sued, which is why, if I'm not mistaken, and Moen, you might have read this or remembered this from one of the other conversations, that the Pac-12, the existing Pac-12, before everybody breaks off to go to the Big Ten and the Big 12 or to nowhere land, had to vote for the agreement as Pac-12 members. I believe they didn't even do a conference call. I think they did it in writing via email or something. So I think retroactively, it's where they were at the time that the lawsuit happened and the settlement got, not where they're going to be next week or next month or 2 years from now.
OPD Don's here. Good to see you, OP. Hope you're having a good Memorial Day weekend, sir. It's beginning to look like the money purchase for FSU are starting to lean back to the SEC. And on another note, I once dated a girl named Syracuse. Very well done, sir. Well done.
I mean, I don't know if that was organic, but it was original. So I think you really get to make it happen. And if it's also true, then double points, probably double drinks there.
Syracuse. If you legitimately dated a girl named Syracuse, you got to drink doubles on that one, Opie. Break into that liquor cabinet. Movie Time Blues. One has to take into consideration the personal animus between the Big Ten and ESPN. The four-letter will try to deny them access to another region. That's a problem. You can't. Unless you take Miami and Florida State into the SEC, you can't deny them both. It's, you got to sacrifice a queen.
Right. Well, you also have to take into account that ESPN is now going into business with Fox and others for the streaming app where all the sports are being pulled together. So all the main players in college football are, for the most part, a part of that. So, things change really quickly. Whatever yesterday's enemy could be tomorrow's neutral person, and your friend in 5 years.
Nunn says it'd be great to have Miami and FSU in the Big Ten.
I would love that.
And then OPD Don said he did date a girl named Syracuse. if you ain't bullshitting, man, you better be breaking open that liquor cabinet and buying a lotto ticket. The SEC and ESPN have a chance to wow the FSU administration and change the narrative, which is what it will take to overcome the stigma caused by the playoff snub. Yeah, they will have that option, but the Big Ten's also going to have an option to wow them, and I think the Big Ten can offer a little more to them than the SEC and ESPN can. But that's just me.
Yeah, I don't know how you're. I think you just have to go bygones be bygones, and we're gonna. Here's what the future is, and we can make this happen for you easier. I don't think they're ever going to get over it any more than, any school will get over a snub or a bad call on the last play that materially completely changed the game in whatever key game you want to think of. And they have a really good case. As much as it'd be easy for me to try to dunk on FSU based off of the past, they should have gotten it in, even if the argument made sense for trying to get the four best teams with their current roster. I could understand that, but they should have gotten in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Florida State should have been in the playoffs. There's no doubt in my mind Alabama should have been left out. The SEC should have been left out this year. Sorry, I mean, sometimes it's got to be deserving it more. So.
Yeah, I don't remember it's a committee, so it's not the same thing, but you don't have that happen where somebody's roster going into the playoffs in other sports, which is why college football has always been messed up, are determined by a committee. There's only a few of those there, and most of them were not on the edge of just 4 teams or 2 team scenarios, right? It's easier to make a mistake or be less upset when you're the 13th team versus the 12th team, or team 65 on the bubble versus 64 in the past, or the play-in.
All right, we got about 10 more minutes left, guys. If you want to go ahead and give us some questions, we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. Obviously, if it's a super chat, we'll defer to that. We defer to members' comments also as well. So I just want to give you guys a 10-minute warning. Then we're going to let you get back to your holiday weekends. Enjoy some with your friends and family, and we will catch you guys on Tuesday. Yeah. Says screw SPN forever. Then a line like Ted says you better find a girl named Georgia Tech, Opie. It'd have to be Georgia Tech or something like that. I don't think Tech's a very unless it's like Tech, Tekk or something. Maybe Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech.
I mean, you've seen some people's names that you think, what were their parents thinking? Because they had to know going in. So, it's entirely possible that the Tech family thought they were going to be cute.
I once knew a girl whose parents named her Nicotina. And I cannot think of a worse name than Nicotina. And her parents weren't named Nick and Tina. Just get that out of the way. It wasn't like some combo name. It was Nicotina. That poor girl. My heart still goes out to you, Nicotina. You got a worse one than that?
I do, but it might get us flagged on.
Oh, okay.
But let's just say the Hunt family has named their sons poorly at times.
Yes, there you go. Big Ten can offer more money and more academic prestige to Florida State.
I think that clearly the Big Ten has that history, and the academic alliance benefit if it proves true. But there's a lot of history and cultural fit with Florida State and the SEC. If you took away the problems, like the SEC doesn't prevent from Florida State from getting AAU status or growing their research if they want to. Potentially the Big Ten can help accelerate that, but until it does, you don't know.
Illini Ted, I just wonder how many people in Georgia are in the tech sector. Probably quite a bit, because Atlanta is one of the fastest growing markets in America. I know that. I wonder if there's a girl out there named Georgia Tech. Probably, but I think you probably find a Georgia Tech or Georgia Tech with a K a little more easily. It wasn't about Bama or FSU. It was about making sure that the ACC was officially a second-tier conference and the SEC exceptionally better in the public perception ahead of the P5 to the P2 change. You might be right, and ESPN is right at the forefront of that.
I mean, I'm into conspiracies at times, not to the degree that some others are. I don't know what planet the day before that decision happened, SEC was clearly perceived to be a bigger conference, important wise for the key sport of football than the ACC was. Like, I don't know that their reputation got better or more things came to them. They clearly screwed the ACC and clearly screwed Florida State in particular.
Terry Snyder, go Cougs. Order some Washington State Old Crimson Lager beer, Cougar Collective from Pike Brewing. If somebody wants to send me free beer, by all means, I will give it a good home. FSU would rather be in a conference that wants them rather than a conference that just wants to keep them away from the Big Ten. That's from Minnesota Seminoles. So there you go. They must have been heavy smokers. Nicotina. No, they was spelled Nicotina. Nicotina. Hand to God. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was bullshit when I first heard it too. And I saw the driver's license. Terry Snyder, go Cougs from Connor Johnson. Beavers and Cougars uniting here. Movie Time Blues, the sports offerings post-house will certainly be affected. The jockeying over which sports survive and which get cut will be fascinating. Future of U.S. Olympic performances on the line.
Yeah, unknown for sure.
David Kreitzer, the big started it all, taking Nebraska from the Big 12. Colorado moved to the Pac-12 before Nebraska moved to the Big 12. So, I mean, you could also blame the Pac for, but honestly, it all started with Oklahoma and Texas talking to people.
I mean, you can make an argument too that it's the Big Ten, that Texas specifically started by doing the Longhorn Network.
Yes. You could go even further back and say Notre Dame started it by not joining the Big Ten in 1993. And I'm just saying, if you go to the members only section, there's a video called Timeline, Arms Race of 1995, that shows where the conferences most likely would be, in my opinion, had that happened. None. ESPN always tries to control the narrative to inflate the SEC. Of course they do. It's their biggest brand. Their biggest college brand. Yeah,
that's their job. I mean, I'm not a big fan of that or anyway, but like the Fox does what they can to inflate the Big Ten. That's their job too. That's their prime property. You feel it more, or at least I think I feel it more for ESPN because they're always on with sports, and ESPN as an entity has more of the prime sports outside of college football. In terms of past viewership, even if people are tuning away from them right now with Sports Center and all that world versus FS1 had more of the eyeballs. So it feels worse, but that's what the network's jobs are to do, even if we don't like it.
Doc Gibbs, what is unique about the ACC is that it has an entire state, North Carolina, wanting it to survive with all its tax and credit, etc. authority. I will go ahead and let you plug that video from earlier today. I think you've got more videos from that show coming out with Bill Farley.
Yeah, for sure. If you didn't get a chance yet to go back to Thursday, there's a long conversation with Bill Farley, who you should also follow on Twitter, where Bomber and I talked to him, and specifically he's a PhD in public policy and finance, and talked about the economic impact of having those four schools in the ACC, plus these ACC headquarters. Not sure what's going on there. And just the general impact of why a lot of people in North Carolina might want to have the ACC not go away, and might have pressure on North Carolina to not leave to make a conference move the way that everybody would have expected.
Yeah,
there's
I mean,
also
it's
a short clip today too, if you only want to digest it into like an 8.5-minute segment that focuses on there.
Right, and there's going to be more clips coming out.
Correct. Yeah, we also went into conversations about the entire role of private equity in the conversations that really came to a head again this week, led by Drew Weatherford, who's been out there talking about it, a Florida State guy. Bill had a definite opinion about that aspect of the private equity conversation, which ironically sort of differs from his take on how Florida State itself actually seems to have their head on straight about how to do it. So he's of two minds of it, and you can watch the full episode or wait for some cuts that we can highlight sort of the two competing thoughts there.
Yeah, and that's another great reason why you guys have to subscribe to the channel. We're almost to 4,000 subscribers. Make sure you're subscribed, and if you want to stay up to date with all this information we bring you from great sources, make sure you turn on your notifications too. You can also go ahead and give us likes on the videos and likes on the streams. Leave comments. We check all that stuff, guys. So please do that. That helps us out the most, and it's absolutely free to you. I can't stress enough how much that means to us. Illini Ted says Georgia was probably the most deserving team, but them losing in the ACC championship, SEC championship, went against the criteria the committee released.
That's a fair point too.
And Coy said, you must forget what the ACC did to the Big East. As a Miami guy, you can speak to that.
Yeah, and ironically, that actually was a time when the Florida governor weighed in on the case and the benefit on behalf of Miami too. So the state government is doing what they can from the form of the attorney general and just getting behind those lawsuits in general. It's not the first time that Florida did that on behalf of an institution in their state that regardless of it not being a public university, they actually were, when there was a Big East lawsuit or threat against Miami and a couple of other schools, Florida weighed in on that as well, just like they're doing now for Florida State.
OPD Don, being from Louisiana, I went to school with girls named Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Also ones named April, May, and June. We drank a lot in Louisiana. My dad was drunk when he named me. True story. God bless him, Opie.
Good icebreaker every time.
I dated one girl from Louisiana, and her name was Jenny, so maybe she was just special. Pretty sad that within 3 months, both the ACC and Big East got screwed by committees. True enough.
And it's not necessarily going to go away. It's just going to be further down the food chain in the next college football playoff, right? There may not be a clear-cut line between who does or doesn't get into the last slot. It's just harder to cry for somebody with 3 losses potentially.
Definitely. Illini Ted, you can't really blame anyone for realignment. It has been going on since the beginning of conferences. It just ramped up with the crazy money now.
Yeah, we're just more aware of it. But if you go through time, there's a lot of conferences that were really big, depending upon how old you are, that you would never have thought would go away, or especially on the regional level. But even in the history of people leaving conferences that you can't imagine that people would have willingly left the SEC at different times in the past, but they did.
Jim F says Texas started it by working with the PAC to move 6 schools over, and Colorado and Nebraska jumped to make sure they had a seat. A&M didn't want to go west and started looking east. Stay tuned for that video, guys. The PAC 16. It'll be a very interesting video. I think you'll like it. None. The problem is they help manipulate the rankings of lower ranked teams just prior to those teams playing Alabama or Georgia. True enough.
Yeah, for sure. But there's a lot of voters in that, so there's influence for sure. They have that reach that others don't, but a lot of people help contribute to the rankings heading into that zone.
Illini Ted, Nebraska brought us crazy numbers in women's volleyball ticket sales. They did. That was a huge event last year. Maybe not what we brought them in for. But you know what? Nebraska sells out every damn game. So even when they're bad, they sell out. So you got to give props to Nebraska for that. Tony Lawson, funny thing, if Georgia beat Alabama, Florida State would have made the playoffs.
Most likely.
Tony Losh and the Line 10 corn whiskey. Agree women's volleyball is well worth the Huskers admission. Smiley face from Tony Watson. I think we'll end the show with that for tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming out and joining the show with us. I know it's a holiday weekend and you got lots of places you could be and could be things you could be doing instead of sitting on stream drinking with two guys talking college football. But we appreciate you for coming out and doing that with us. I want to thank everybody. If you want to view some membership videos, by all means, become a member of the channel and support us that way. But please, please, please make sure to like and subscribe. I would like to hit that 4,000 subscriber goal. And those likes and the comments on the video, if you're watching after the fact, we pay attention to those and we go back and we talk to people, and it means a lot to us and it really helps boost us in the algorithm. So please do that.
Absolutely.
And for Tony, I'm going to give one drunk nightbot in the chat for him and say peace out. We will see you guys on Tuesday. Have a good
rest of your weekend, everyone.
Yep. Have a good Memorial Day weekend, guys, and make sure you stay safe out there. Don't drink and drive.